مساء الخير مرة أخرى وأهلا ومرحبا بكم من جديد لمتابعة جلساتنا المختلفة في هذه القمة. كانت استراحة طويلة يوسف.
Yeah, it was a long break, to be very honest. Quite a lot of rejuvenation here. And those of you who managed to stick around are going to have the lion's share of the information we have in store for them. Are we right?
نعم، وتتواصل إذن جلسات قمة المعرفة 2018 ونستقبل الجلسة الرابعة يوسف، فيها الفائزين طبعا اللي تم تكريمهم بجائزة المعرفة قبل ساعات. ويسرنا أن نرحب بالبروفيسور السير مجدي يعقوب، مؤسس ومدير مؤسسة مجدي يعقوب للقلب. كما نرحب بالسيد ماكسيميليان أنجرهوزر، نائب الرئيس التنفيذي لمعهد التعليم الدولي، والدكتور سعود الصلاحي المشرف العام على المكتبة الرقمية السعودية. ويدير معهم هذا الحوار ديفيد بنت، عضو اللجنة الاستشارية لجائزة محمد بن راشد آل مكتوم للمعرفة، تحت عنوان جميل جدا: تكريم المعرفة.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give you the subtitles from my colleague Safia here. The Knowledge Summit 2018 sessions continue, and on our fourth session of this day, a unique one that features the winners of the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Award. We gladly welcome Professor Sir Majdi Yaqub, founder and director of the Majdi Yaqub Heart Foundation, Mr. Maximilian Angerholzer, the third Executive Vice President of the Institute of International Education, and Dr. Saud Salahi, the Director General of the Saudi Digital Library. And last but not least, this session, yours truly, is moderated by David Bennett, a member of the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Advisory Committee. Please welcome them.
Hello, and thank you all for coming. As my fellow panelists come out, I want to begin by acknowledging our hosts and our patron. When I worked for National Geographic, we were one of the recipients of the Knowledge Prize 5 years ago. And we are deeply grateful for the work of the Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Foundation and the Sheikh's personal leadership in making knowledge available to people of the world. So thank you for being with us, but again, our sincere thanks to the foundation for making all of this possible. So what I thought we would do to begin our session today, because some of these organizations that have won the Knowledge Award this year may be familiar to you, some of them may be new. So what I thought we could do is begin by inviting each of the panelists to spend a few minutes telling us about your organization and about how it connects to the theme of knowledge, particularly to knowledge in youth. And Dr. Al-Salahi, I will start with you if I may.
Thank you very much. First of all, we are very honored to be here in this summit, and as the Saudi Digital Library is proud to serve the educational resources for all the Saudi universities among the kingdom, we are honored to participate in this summit in 2018. And I think the Saudi Digital Library was launched in 2005 and was responsible to provide all the digital resources for the academics in order to reach the literature globally, locally, nationally, internationally, whatever in all the specialists that are needed by academics in order to increase the visibility and increase the output of the production of the Saudi scientific research. So this is the main aim of it, and SDL has partnership with all publishers, more than 300 publishers, as I mentioned, either from local publishers, from Arab publishers, or from the international publishers, and all the specialists. And in order to reach the Vision 2030 of Saudi Arabia, of course, the pillar of researching is SDL. Without SDL, I think universities might be difficult for them in order to reach all these resources. The main aim also of the Saudi Digital Library is to organize this consortia by reduce the cost that the government pays to all publishers. So now publishers, in a way or another, they come to one entity which is responsible for providing these digital resources to all the Saudi universities. We serve more than 6 million end users, from academics, professors, from students, postgraduates, undergraduate students. And before 8 years, the Saudi Digital Library opens its doors to have all the Saudi teachers in public schools. Now, more than 500,000 teachers, they can go to the Saudi Digital Library and search for their resources that can benefit them in their education process.
So when you and others began the library, what was the situation in Saudi universities before the digital library was created? Did some have lots of resources and others not many? What was the pre-existing circumstance?
The pre-exist services, each university runs its resources by its own from its budget. And this has many, I can say, limits, many difficulties. One university, they can have what they can have. Other universities, because of the financial, I can say, limits, they have limited resources. Now, with one budget comes to Saudi Digital Library, which governed by the Ministry of Education, all the resources to all universities, they can access these digital resources, whatever the university ranks, whether it is a new universities or it is old universities. However, SDL is in the front of the Ministry of Education is to provide whatever needs necessary for each university. And this is the, can say, the challenge for Saudi Digital Library. However, in the previous years, and I'm very sure that with its good partnership with publishers, with its, can say, position in acquiring and following all the new digital resources in all the departments that we have in Saudi Digital Library, we ensure that we aim to provide every new needed resource, digital resources for each university.
Interesting. Now, Maximilian Angerholzer, how does the Institute for International Education build on this idea of creating knowledge for communities? Is it primarily university students? Is it all different levels? Tell me about the work that you do.
That's a great question. Thank you. And again, I want to thank all of you for being a part of this summit. I'm very honored to represent IIE here, and to win this Knowledge Award was a tremendous surprise and honor, and it's something I'm very humbled by and proud to be a part of this. IIE, as you know, David, was started 100 years ago. It was after World War I, and the hope was that you could bring together an organization in a global community to promote greater knowledge and education, and by creating this community, you could overcome diplomatic and political challenges. You could transcend borders. You could promote peace. You could bring people together. And so through that education and promotion of knowledge, that's how we got connected with the MBR Foundation, and that's why we're here today. And so I'm honored to be a part of that. IIE is one of the world's largest international exchange organizations. So we run a number of programs, over 220 programs around the world. We have 20 offices around the world, and we promote these exchanges of bringing scholars and students to different places around the world. We're probably most known for our work with the United States State Department, and specifically we have administered the Fulbright program for over 70 years. So we run a number of exchanges like that where we try to bring more international people to the United States and send more Americans abroad. We also work with foreign governments like UAE, and with corporations and foundations around the world to, again, it's about student and scholar mobility. A lot of it is at the undergraduate and graduate level, but I think our belief is that the more opportunities that Americans have abroad, the better off they'll be, and vice versa. And that with all of the global challenges that all of us in this room are very well aware of, we think education is the recipe to overcome that, and particularly starts with the youth. And that's why I'm so glad that there's a big focus on youth this year with the summit, because if you empower youth through education and through knowledge, they can change the world, and we need them to bring the world forward.
So when you create these programs, how do those networks of students stay together? When you send people out or they get to meet new communities, how does that become kind of an ongoing, thriving community like a university community is?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great question. I think part of it is they have that shared experience, right? So, you know, if I participate in a scholarship program or an exchange program abroad, that's an impact on me. It's an impact on the folks in that country who I get to meet and interact with, but I also have that experience with my fellow students or with my fellow scholars. And so you have those shared experiences, and then you sort of create this alumni network, right? And so whether there are opportunities to get together in person in the future or stay connected online, I think that's one of the things that we try to promote, because education in itself is an experience. As you matriculate through a university or through your education, you're learning a lot about who you are in the world around you, but you're also making these relationships, right? And I can think of, in my career, in my life, the amazing friends I've made in every corner of the world. And because of technology and growing technology, you're able to stay in touch with people even if you're not with them all the time.
Interesting. And Sir Magdi, your entire career has been connected to learning and connected to academics. And now obviously with the work that you're doing with your Heart Foundation in Egypt. Can you tell us about that work?
Thank you very much indeed. On behalf of the foundation, I would like to acknowledge our grateful thanks to having this award, which was received by the chairman of our board, Mr. Mu'taz. Now, the foundation is dedicated to advancing knowledge, that's what pertains to this group here, in heart disease, both advancing knowledge by generating new knowledge in particular heart diseases, which are specific to the region and to Africa in particular, but to all the region. And how do we do that? We train young scientists and doctors to research into the local diseases, particularly things like rheumatic heart disease, which has been eradicated in the West and in rich countries, but it is absolutely rife in low and middle income countries, and unfortunately Egypt is one. And so also we research into reversal of heart failure because there is no transplant program, heart transplant program in Egypt or in the region, but there are some budding efforts. But we have strategies to reverse heart failure. And importantly, we look into inherited genetic heart disease by local researchers, by Egyptian and people from the region, to see what are the inherited heart muscle disease, for example, inherited what we call channelopathies, irregular heartbeat, why people die suddenly. This is very, very important. And then to try and find out how does that happen. I'm sorry to be a bit verbose, but I'm just showing how we are generating knowledge in the region. We have to study the genome of the local population. So we have attached to Aswan Heart Center population studies in a village called Balana. And the Balana Heart Study actually looks into what is affecting the local population. And we also have 1,000 Egyptian genomes, because when you look at genetic variants, we call them disease producing variants. You have to find out what is relevant to the particular population, because there is ethnic variation. And when we try and see what is disease-forming variations in the genome of our patients, we have to relate it to that. Up till now, we've been looking, comparing it to the 100,000 genome from the US and from the UK, and that's not appropriate, actually, scientifically. So we're creating the 1,000 Egyptian genome, where we have a study called EdgeVol, where that is volunteers, and we try and relate it. So we're generating a whole lot of knowledge in the region by Egyptian and other scientists from the region and from different parts of the world, of course. The other message as well, or mission we have, is treating heart disease, offering heart disease to people who are poor and desolate and have nothing. They have no opportunity, other opportunity for their kids, babies and things to be treated, so that we offer that treatment from the foundation for free, but at the highest level. So we are very proud to be part of the knowledge generation, but also we have knowledge dissemination. So we have a journal which is called Global Cardiology, Science and Practice. So we try and combine global science and practice, and that's open access, I'm happy to say. So that is financed from our foundation, but it is global. Anybody can access it, and it is, again, have a lot of science, a lot of practice. And we hold seminars in Aswan where we have knowledge dissemination, and that's open again to colleagues from the region. So that is, in short, what we try and do.
And through that work, you must be funding a generation, the next generation of scientists from the region to actually be studying issues that affect the people of the region, as opposed to having them go to the west or go east to study and do their work there. That must be very different. The scale you're talking about is very impressive.
Absolutely. I think it is. We are proud to see that, the doctors and cardiologists and heart surgeons are actually young Egyptian people who are doing the most complex surgery. I'm very proud to see that. But also the scientists, young scientists from Egypt mostly. Some of them have degrees from Imperial College and UCL in London and Stanford, but a lot of them are actually being funded by the foundation and by the Alfie Foundation as well to obtain higher degrees. But they're working locally in Aswan, actually generating this knowledge, because sequencing the genome, as you know, actually they do it in the wet lab, but that's not the important thing, because you can buy it, you can send it to a Chinese company and get the thing. The trick is that you must have very, very strong bioinformatics, which try and analyze, because you get the thing back and saying, we have 100,000 variants. What's the significance of that? So we have bioinformatic groups, local young people sitting there in the lab doing bioinformatics. They also have analyzed the imaging. So we have very, very sophisticated imaging in terms of CT or MRI. But again, what's in a picture? You need to study that for days, weeks, by computer scientists to generate an actual picture of what happens in the heart. Not statically, but also dynamically. You see what is happening, and that is we're generating this new generation of physician scientists who can actually look into the future with confidence, presenting their knowledge to the rest of the world and looking after their population who need it so badly. There is so much pain and disease around the region. You wouldn't believe it.
And I'm curious, to the Saudi Digital Library, that must, 20 years ago before this project, students might have to go to universities out of the country to access the journal articles and the data and the studies they needed. You must be doing a great deal to be able to keep Saudis at home working at your own universities and growing from there. What are you starting to see, or have you seen anything yet in terms of how those students stay in country and work on issues that affect Saudi people, much like Dr. Yaqub was talking about in Egypt?
Yeah, this is a great question. And of course, before 10 years before the establishment of the Saudi Digital Library, it was difficult for students to search and to go either locally in the kingdom to go for physical libraries or to go for Arabic libraries. I know some of my friends 10 years ago, they used to go to Egypt, to go to other countries only to seek the resources for the research. Nowadays, by click on their mobile, even by their applications, on their network, and they can work 24 hours daily to reach those resources. So this impacts on the time of the academics to search for the knowledge, and SDL now is a society of knowledge. Our aim nowadays is not only to provide these resources to the academics. This is something any publisher can do for universities. We need to seek to build analytical tools in order to provide every academics, every university, every decision makers in the kingdom with the right decisions. What resources our researchers they are research? What are the titles? What are the research gaps? So these are now the function of the Saudi Digital Library, to work for a knowledge society that can build on the country improvement and development. Nowadays, as a country, we can see a huge and dramatic change. If SDL cannot provide those resources that can enhance those developments in all the governmental sectors and private sectors, I think SDL is not anymore helping those academics to search. So yes, SDL provides the resources to the location of every researcher. However, this is not the final aim of SDL. And now, even universities, they ask us, please, you are not only a channel or repository of research, you are more than that. So now, when we negotiate with publishers, so any publisher come to SDL, we say, look, we need your resources, but we need other services beyond the resources that you provide to us. So what are the authorship that you're going to provide to our researchers, our end users? What are the training? They're raising their awareness about research, about digital resources. We are very proud that we are having nowadays more than 200 million digital resources. However, that's proud might be not the proud of the decision makers of Saudi Digital Library. Why? If they see that the usage of these digital resources are very low. So our main role is to increase the usage and to also follow the output of the Saudi scientific output. Year by year. We are very proud that Saudi Arabia nowadays is the first in the Arab region in research-wise power production. This is something without SDL, before SDL 2011, Saudi Arabia is the third in Arab countries. Now it is the first. Globally, in 2011, Saudi Arabia was 56. Nowadays, 2017, it was 28. So this is because of the digital resources that SDL is providing and also the quality that we aim to have. So not every resource can be within the repository of Saudi Digital Library.
And Max, you would probably argue as well that there's something about the exchange of ideas that come from different peoples in different places and countries, and certainly the practice of medicine and training of residents and fellows is that kind of hands-on person-to-person approach. How do you bring, what's the benefit to knowledge generated and shared in that exchange model?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, the exchange itself is important, but what you're learning together and what you're building together is even more important. And I think from an American perspective, we want to make sure that all the exchanges are a two-way street, right? So if you have an American student or American scholars coming to Dubai to study abroad or doing an exchange program, there are certainly things that those Americans are bringing to the table, but it's almost more important to make sure that both sides are playing to their strengths. And if you're talking about, different parts of the world, whether you're talking about health, infectious diseases, there are different people who have different strengths and backgrounds, and we can all come together and learn from that, because we can do a lot more together than we can apart. And sometimes that takes time, and sometimes there are challenges with that. I mean, I think with any exchange and with any relationship, you have to be patient, and it has to build. But I think it's worth the long-term investment. I mean, we are talking about knowledge promotion here today, and we have to get out of our silos. It can't just be UAE, it can't just be the United States. We all have to work together as a global community.
And Dr. Yaqub, how does that work that you're doing in Egypt tie into what Max was just saying in terms of creating this and supporting this next generation of the young Egyptian cardiologists and cardiac surgeons and microbiologists? How does that person-to-person connection that Max talks about apply in your scientific field?
I think that's fundamental, because I think knowledge has no boundary, and it's enriching to exchange ideas with other groups. And indeed, the same scientists I was just talking about are parts of a more international effort, like funded by Leduc Foundation for exchange of ideas. And our scientists, the young people I was just talking about, come to the UK, and they were in New York a couple of weeks ago, where we were exchanging ideas with our groups, the bigger research group from Europe and the US. And now the same group are coming to Aswan, and we will have the same science program through the exchange on a Nile cruise, which then we can exchange ideas with the young scientists, actually learning from their peers, if you like, in different countries. And it works both ways, by the way. I mean,
Absolutely.
It is not a one-way thing from the rich to low and middle income. But actually, the reverse occurs, because when we have young scientists, trainees, like you were saying, come to Aswan, my God, they go back much more knowledgeable about certain diseases they've never seen, and showing how people actually interact in a low resource income. And indeed, new operations are being generated in that. So the exchange of ideas is just fundamental.
Yes.
So we admire a lot the work you're doing.
Well, and I would just say that, again, it's all about the promotion of knowledge, the growth of economies, the building of societies, and these are universal languages, right? If you're talking about health, you're talking about medicine, this is what brings people together. I mean, we all may have different backgrounds. We all may come from different geographies,
different parts of the world, richer countries, poorer countries, different religions. We may look different, we may be of different races, but these are ways to bring people together and to overcome our differences. And what's extraordinary to see is that if you get a bunch of students together working on a project from different parts of the world, they overcome it immediately. You know, they are building these relationships that overcomes the diplomatic challenges. And it's the same if you have two heart surgeons that are working together. Maybe they have never worked together before, but they have that experience and they share that sort of universal language of medicine and innovation and that entrepreneurial spirit. So,
but I am intrigued, Dr. Yacob, by something that is one way in the best way, which is overcoming the kind of historical imperialism in the scientific studies by accessing the Egyptian genome and creating new knowledge really of people in this region. What other things do you see, opportunities do you see for the growth of knowledge beyond even what you're doing, of what the particular needs are medically or otherwise of people in the Arab world?
I think that the way to look at it, there has been several studies showing that for things to thrive, everybody should benefit. So it should be a win-win-win. And in our model, the first win has to be the patient and humanity. That's where we look at. But actually, everybody else who works on the problem wins. So I become a richer person, intellectually that is, by working with somebody else for the benefit of humanity. So the win-win-win concept. And there has been a very interesting recent Nobel Prize of people from MIT, one from the UK and one from Finland, actually developing that model of win-win-win. So that's what I subscribe to. Everybody has to win-win. I hope I'm answering your question. What other ways of benefit? Everybody should benefit, but we should not lose sight of why are we here. We are here to benefit society, humanity, and in our case, patients, the massive amount of suffering which we see firsthand. Maybe many people don't see the suffering which is hidden from them, conveniently maybe, but it is there.
So one thing that I just realized that we've taken almost as an assumption for this panel, which is being challenged in other places, is the value of the university. And in some places you're hearing more talk about trade schools, more talk about other opportunities for people, but each of the three of you are coming from a place of advocating for the value of the formal college or university system. That's not something we're necessarily hearing in all corners of the world right now, that university is the place, but clearly the three of you are invested in that model. Why is a stronger university system so central to kind of Saudi economic development, and just generally, why do you see universities as more important than ever?
I mean, knowledge is universal, and whether it is local or international. However, I mean, universities in everywhere are the source of knowledge, where academics are working there for research. So even for those people in health or in education or engineering, I mean, their work at the end comes from a university, I mean, colleges, universities, conferences, universities, journals. So that's why, for example, SDL is providing these resources to those Saudi universities. This does not mean that knowledge is only there to universities. Many of the initiatives that is within the Saudi Vision 2030 runs by the Ministry of Education. More than 36 of those. And education in my country, of course, we have public and we have the higher education. And higher education has the role of research and output, and runs the advancement in the scientific research. That's why SDL is responsible for providing those universities with these resources, and we are aiming not only providing the resources to them, we are also aiming to have the resources, make it visible for the public in Saudi Arabia, and make it visible for the research worldwide. That's why we can make it a win-win situation. So we are seeking not have the Saudi digital resources, the research, to be closed. We want it to be open resources for others to see what we are doing, what are the advancements in Saudi Arabia, and how can we benefit other societies. That's why I mention, I believe that knowledge is universal. It is not limited to space. It is not limited to a certain group or a certain ethnicity. And this is it. Why universities? Because the SDL as initiative, it began from a university, which is King Saud University. Now, till now, it is only for universities. From 3 months ago, we opened the door for also public education. So this is what the aim of Saudi Digital Library.
Interesting. So, Dr. Yaqub, how do you make the decision at the foundation, or how do you advise policymakers how to balance your pursuit of new knowledge versus your dissemination and treatment? Because as you say, there are people suffering today and more people every day. But to invest in basic sciences and to invest in original research, how do you have that conversation with policymakers or make that choice yourself?
That's an excellent question. Not very easy. We fight all the time. We don't actually, but there is this idea of how do we improve the current service and how do we generate new knowledge for the next generation. And because we have benefited massively from the knowledge generated in the past. And we know for sure that what you, sir, have just said, that blue sky research, which is not applied, which is not directed, which is not a Manhattan project to produce an atomic bomb, it is just blue sky research, has actually benefited mankind much more than directed research. So do we put all our effort in our group in applied research, and we have tissue engineering and I don't know what, or we allow our young scientists to think for themselves about blue sky research, just generating knowledge for the sake of generating knowledge. And people say, oh, no, industry would not like that. But we know that blue sky research, penicillin, for example, was discovered from somebody doing something else completely. Electromagnetic, what we have benefited, for example, from Fourier analysis, which is getting digital to analog, actually started by Fourier heating pipes and looking at heat arriving, and people say the guy's mad. What is he doing that? That's blue sky research. So how do we balance that type of research? That was your question, I think. It's very difficult, all right? We have to come to a conclusion, and I said we fight, we don't fight. We say, all right, 70% of our research effort will be applied, and 30% to blue sky. You want to research for something which you think is just knowledge for the sake of generating knowledge. Good luck to you. We will support you, and we will back it with our research effort. Have I answered your question?
You have. It's I mean, it is a very difficult situation because this whole region, we talk about the vibrancy of youth in the region, but that also means there are a lot of young people that need jobs. There's economic development that needs to happen along the way. And it's got to be a struggle for all of the countries of the region because it's...
But forgive me for
Please.
interrupting. But if you want to make a massive discovery, you must not forget blue sky research, and you must not be limiting in allowing people to think for themselves, not from me telling them what to do and say, come on guys, what do you think, what do you want? So encouraging intellectual freedom is essential if we are going to make a massive leap in science. And if you have a massive leap in science, the whole country will benefit, of course. And industry, society, wow, wow, wow. But you didn't support me when I was talking about something which sounded crazy. We need to support crazy ideas. That's what.
And so, Max, part of what must be crazy ideas is about... Right. This is a room full of people that's good with crazy ideas, I think. Max, when you talk about intellectual freedom, part of it also comes from having a different perspective that comes from crossing a border, working with other people. How do you see the results of that intellectual freedom coming back after the experience? So if students have an exchange experience, if a faculty member has exchange experiences, how do you see that kind of transforming their work and the institutions that they're a part of?
I mean, that's an excellent question. You're actually doing a really good job as the moderator. You've had some really good questions. Thank you. Well, they're bringing back the knowledge and experience that they've had that they wouldn't have had otherwise, right? And so, if I'm a heart surgeon or a heart doctor, and I have an experience with MU in Cairo, maybe I have learned a different technique. Maybe I have seen a patient who was inflicted in a certain way that I hadn't experienced that before, and then I take that experience back to the United States with me, and then I share it with my students and colleagues. I mean, I think part of it is these exchanges and pursuing knowledge for the sake of the knowledge, for the sake of the intellectual advancement, for the building of economies to bring more people out of poverty and to overcome some of our challenges, but it's also changing worldviews, right? And so maybe I'm a doctor in the United States and I think I know everything about heart surgery, and then I go and I have an experience with you or some of your colleagues, and it opens my mind to a completely different perspective or a way of doing things or a way of looking at the world that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. And I just think of my own experiences that I've had internationally. I didn't leave the United States until I was 20 years old, but my entire worldview and how I look at problems and how I interact with people and how I try to find solutions is based upon what I've learned from people around the globe from different walks of life and getting their perspectives. And so I think the exchange of people and ideas is paramount, and I'm glad we're in a room full of people that agree with that.
I just would like to support what you have just said. We talked about technology and knowledge, but actually human interaction is very, very important. And many people who come to spend some time at the Aswan Heart Center actually learn and go back saying, oh my God, I interacted with my fellow men, but also interacted with the rest of society. I have never seen somebody who is desperate, and that enriches my human to human interaction, apart from science and knowledge. That human factor is sometimes forgotten in science, and people see scientists as awful people sitting in the lab putting potions together and generating fumes, and that's not the case. There is a lot of human to human interaction, which is part of science, to my way of thinking.
So I'm going to ask one more question, but then also we want to open up questions to the audience. So there may be microphones that'll be available. If not, if you could just kind of come up towards the front so I can hear your question, and then I'll repeat it back to the audience as a whole. Actually, sorry, I saw you had a question. If you'll tell me, I'll repeat it back to the audience as a whole. Yes. Right. Right. Interesting. Thank you. The gentleman is a gastroenterologist and was talking about microbiomes as a new emerging area of field that again become something different in different communities and different cultures based on different diets and different genetic backgrounds. And kind of was asking kind of how does he get that project going? And maybe I will frame that to get support for the project. Maybe I'll frame that differently. How have you been able to find support, sir, for your work identifying the Egyptian genome as it relates to heart disease and cardiovascular health? Because that might be an example for how we could get funding for other projects like that.
I didn't understand the question completely. Would you kindly repeat?
What I say is how did you secure funding, support, volunteers, participation for your Egyptian genomic studies?
Oh, thank you very much. Up till now, we've been funding it from inside sources, from the foundation, which our chairman of the board is sitting there. We have to go to him and say, we want money for both the treatment and for the research, because we said our mission is not just treatment, it's treatment and research and knowledge generation. We cannot go on like that because, as you quite rightly said, and the cost is escalating, and we get our money entirely up till now from donations, and the donations are from all sectors of the society, rich and poor, and we get a lot from the poor who donate a massive amount of their income to us. So we are honor-bound to do what they wanted us to do, but we declared that we are treating people, but we're generating knowledge, and in our mission statement, research is part of the service, and they know that. We can't go on like that because the money will dry up and we cannot treat our patients. So there are grants. The Leduc is one I've just mentioned. There has been certain grants specifically for what you have just said, and that is for inherited diseases in Africa. There is a program called H3 Africa, Hereditary Health and something in Africa, which is looking at the genome. The problem is, and it is a problem to us as well, is that you have to satisfy very high levels criteria. This H3 Africa is an initiative from different groups. Actually, they combine together. It is NIH as well as Wellcome. Wellcome Foundation is a very generous foundation. It's an NGO. And it's a really good example of how an NGO, non-governmental, where the NIH is mainly governmental in the US, but they combined and put a mere $80 million for H3 Africa. We have to apply for that, and that's our next stop. So there are ways, but they specify, I mentioned earlier, that we should not be just sending the specimens somewhere to China or Denmark or somewhere, or the US, to sequence, because that's an automatic thing. We must have the bioinformatics. groups which we're building right now, and we hope that we will apply for funding. Have I answered your question?
You have. You have. So I'm curious. Well, the Saudi Digital Library is a university-focused platform at this point. Do you have visions of taking it out towards the broader school system that the ministry supports? Do you see it moving beyond the borders of Saudi Arabia and becoming, pan-Arab in some way? What are your hopes and aspirations for how the library will continue to disseminate knowledge?
This is a very good question, and of course, one of the initiatives, the 25 initiative that Saudi Digital Library is working nowadays on, is to be a national license for knowledge to all the governmental and private corporation sectors in the kingdom. This is the first stage, and we are now working with Ministry of Finance to mandate this to the whole government institutions at the first stage. Second stage for the private sectors. For public schools, as mentioned that just 3 months ago, all the 500,000 teachers, they can now access SDL. This is the second stage of it. By 2020, all the public schools students, they can access it. The challenges that we have now, we don't have the resources for those young generation. But we are now collecting the resources. We are negotiating with all the publishers to have those with us. One of the initiatives is also to provide all the electronic textbook for higher education students. And instead of going to our publishers to buy from them, we can offer them like a book store where they can buy digitally, and this will again reduce the fees for buying those books. For the region, SDL is now working with Ankabut, which is Abu Dhabi launched, with also with the DDDL, which is Dubai Digital Library, in order to have like a consortium for the to be established as a Gulf consortium for the digital resources, and to be public for every citizen in the region for that.
Because, Professor, that can be a huge obstacle to accessing knowledge for so many people around the world, because we talk about the great publication and dissemination of information, and while there's some rise of open access journals, publishers are still making millions and millions of dollars from single universities or colleges to access that. So one solution in a geographic market is simply to make it available to all. But is there a way that we can address it through open source journals, open access journals? Are there other strategies that would make the generosity of the Ministry of Education less necessary in that regard? But people are still being promoted at universities based upon their publication records in part. So how do we balance this? Because this solution that works in Saudi Arabia might not work for every country around the world.
Brilliant question. Actually, this generosity of trying to make everything open, and our foundation actually publishes everything in open access journal, which we edit ourselves from our foundation. The trend now is going that certain funding bodies, including what I have just mentioned, the Wellcome Foundation and the Medical Research Council, MRC UK, are now specifying that if we get a grant from them, that we publish in an open access journal. And that's upsetting many journals, including top journals, who are bound by commercial organizations to publish the journal, and they charge being commercial, and they think that's hurting us. But actually the funding bodies when they give us a grant, they say, you have to publish in an open access, and if you want to publish in one of the other journals, like you have just said, that our scientists will not get promotion unless it's in a high impact factor journal like Nature, which have 70 something, rather than 3 in a specialist journal or something. What do we do next? Actually, the grant says you either publish in the open access or return the money, we won't give you the money, or you can use some of the fund to actually ask the journal, a specific journal, to make it an open access in the other journal. And this is happening, and this is the halfway solution, if you like. Eventually, people think that everything will be open access because of the funding bodies putting pressure on the scientists, go open access. Because if I'm a researcher in Africa and I have ideas, I need to either go to the digital library and say, please give me access, or I just don't get access, or get a certain number of open access journals. Some of the open access journals right now are not really kosher or not proper. But what do? They charge the authors to make it open access, and that is causing a problem yet again, because if you charge the authors, you attract the wrong type of author, and they don't peer review rigidly like the Lancet and Nature and the journals we publish in, where they give you, or New England Journal of Medicine, oh my God, they give you such a hard time. I mean, I published in New England Journal of Medicine. I send the article and get back 200 comments to correct the articles. I said 200 comments. I'm going to spend the next month or years to address all that. But that's necessary to keep their standard. And they do that, they say it costs them money. But what are you going to do? The funding bodies said we might help of defraying that. So your question is really apt. How do we make public, the digital library, and not only confined to Saudi Arabia, but open it up to young scientists around the world, and that's what we need.
Yeah. Sorry, please. I was just going to say, Max, your perspective here might be very interesting because you bring people together from all kinds of economic backgrounds or wealth status of countries to work together, but also to see some of these issues of access to knowledge or limitations to access to knowledge. Kind of what are your observations about kind of lessons learned for how to make knowledge more accessible to more people in more countries in the world?
I think that's a good question. In the United States, we're obviously a wealthy country, and with that, we have a lot of opportunities. But within the U.S., study abroad, for example, that's something that would most oftentimes be for wealthier Americans, and some of the programs we've been involved with are trying to give those opportunities to Americans who don't come from a strong financial background. And I think we've seen that globally. I think when you talk about access to opportunity and education, that's very important. And whether that's giving women and girls more of those opportunities around the world, or if it's giving people of difficult financial backgrounds those opportunities. And I think a lot of countries are struggling with that. The United States still has a long way to go. From a racial diversity standpoint, I think that's also a challenge where the United States is trying to do a better job of the Americans who have an opportunity to say, come and study in the Middle East, that they're not just white Americans that look like me, but they're people from different ethnic backgrounds. And so, I think as a world we have gotten a lot smaller. Higher education has only gotten stronger over the last couple of decades. You were talking earlier, there are different types of learning. It can't just be the 4-year college degree, although all 4 of us up here, work in that space.
But I think that other countries have really raised their game. I mean, you think about the strength of universities and higher education in the Middle East and the Arab world, how much that is improved in the last couple of decades, how much it's improved in North Africa or in Asia. And one of the projects that IIE is involved with is called Open Doors, which studies student mobility around the world. So it tracks the Americans studying abroad and then international students coming to the U.S., and we've been doing this for about 100 years now in terms of tracking these trends. And I think one of the most interesting things that's happened in recent years is how strong higher education is around the world, where it used to be that if you wanted to study abroad or you wanted to find educational opportunities outside of your home country, you would most often look to the United States. And I hope people still do. I mean, I think that that's one of our most important exports in America. But you think about other countries, other universities have really raised their game, and that is making education more accessible. It's giving opportunities to more people. And if you look at what that does for those communities, because if you have a strong, successful university, that is providing knowledge opportunities, that's providing economic growth, that is doing a lot for that community.
And you can certainly see that here in the UAE as well as in Saudi. It's not just the campuses of Western universities that are here and in the region, but the growth of the native higher education sector and the universities across the Emirates, across the region, are becoming recognized for the world-class universities they are. Clearly the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology is a great example of that institutions around the world are looking to model themselves after some of that development in your country's education sector.
Yeah, one of the KPIs in Saudi Vision 2030 is at least 5 universities to be among the best 200 universities worldwide, not only King Abdullah universities. So nowadays, all the universities are seeking to build and increase their capacity for knowledge, within the country and outside the country, to benchmark themselves with other universities. And SDL is playing a great role in this, where by outreaching the Saudi output, the Saudi scientific output, to all other, open resources, by making the Saudi scientific research visible to others. That means increasing the reach to our research, increasing the citation of our research, increasing the benefit, the win-win situation that Prof mentioned before, that knowledge is for a win-win-win situation. It is not only the Saudi research should be within the country itself. If we need our universities to be among the best, that means we need to show up our research output. And SDL now is working on another project which seeking to increase the capacity of all the Saudi journals. We have more than 150 Saudi journals. Those journals, some of them, they are closed. Even some universities within Saudi Arabia didn't know the research of other universities. Now SDL is the repository of all the Saudi research, where we, for example, if you ask X publisher to give us what they have, now we will give those publishers what we have. This is the, the capacity of SDL, where we are aiming to have in the 5 coming years.
So what I'd like to do is kind of just go down the panel this way, just for a little bit of a bigger thought. And this is obviously a room full of people who share your values and share your belief in the power of knowledge, and clearly, as Sheikh Mohammed does as well. Tell me what makes you optimistic about the state of knowledge and the growth of knowledge in the Arab world in particular. When you see your work and the work of your colleagues, what energizes you, what makes you feel optimistic?
the advancement in the mentality of our youth nowadays. People, I mean, we can see that the closed classroom, the closed universities are not that much role in the knowledge of the youth. Youth, they are seeking the advancement of technologies. They can reach the knowledge wherever they want, whenever they want. Now, the Saudi Digital Library can say is the basic environment for our youth. And I advise my colleagues in the Saudi Digital Library that I mentioned to them that in the physical resources, they can go there, they can find lights, they can find a good atmosphere. But in the digital and the artificial atmosphere, we need to give them the capacity of the use of access is very easy to go there. The transmission and the transfer of knowledge from a publisher to other publisher should be easy for them, should be reachable, should be accessible. So the most important element for us to give us this, I can say, optimistic vision is our youth and the vision of Saudi 2030, where we are going to seek in less than 10 years, we need our country to be among the best countries worldwide.
Max?
I think just dovetailing on that, I'm a very optimistic person, and I'm very bullish on the youth of the world and the futures that they have ahead of them. I mean, we have so many challenges right now as a global community. You think about the rise of anti-globalization, you think about populism, you think about stratification of wealth, you think about access to opportunity. That's why we're all here this week, and that's why it's extraordinary that Sheikh Mohammed has brought us all together with the NBR Foundation to have this conversation. But I'm very bullish on the youth of the world bringing us together. Education is what we need to overcome these challenges. The spread of knowledge is what we need to overcome these challenges. We don't have a choice, right? We're all in this together. We just have one earth in one global community, and we do have a lot of challenges, but I'm very optimistic that we can overcome them together. And just looking at the communities and the countries represented on this stage and throughout this room, we all have different perspectives. We all see the world a little different, but I think we all believe that education and knowledge are universal truths and universal languages that can help to overcome some of these challenges.
Professor, what makes you optimistic?
I'm also an optimistic person, but what makes me optimistic mostly is that I have seen firsthand the amount of enthusiasm, the amount of talent and potential in young people in the region. I see them almost every day in Egypt when I go to Aswan. I see these young people bursting with energy. They just need the environment which allows them to go. That's why I'm optimistic. Thank you.
So, if you could pick one or two things to do to help create a better environment, what are those things that you think would be better enable the promotion and acquisition of new knowledge in the region?
I think creation of centers of excellence, and that can be defined by many ways, in the region, which allows these people to innovate, give them the opportunity, access to knowledge, encourage them, just let them go. But the energy is there, and the potential is there, and the intellect is there, but they have no opportunity to use it. We must have centers of excellence in the region. They don't have to go to Stanford or MIT or Harvard. Create these institutions in the country, and that's what's happening in this country, for example, in Egypt, in other places, trying to create the proper environment for intellectual development of young people.
And Dr. Al-Salahi, you talked about one of Saudi 2030 goals is to have 5 universities in the top 200 world ranking. Other than your work to continue to expand the library itself, what obstacles do you think we should try and address, or what are ways that we could better create that environment the professor talked about for acquiring knowledge or creating new knowledge?
I think making the knowledge reachable for every citizen can enhance not only 5 universities to reach the society of knowledge. And this is one of the initiatives that I mentioned before that SDL is working for. Youth is seeking knowledge in order to help for the advancement of our country, and we think that Saudi Arabia with other countries and Saudi Arabia with other countries, they can work together for the humanity where knowledge is one of its pillars. In order to reach that point, we need to enhance the knowledge bases where digital resources, technological resources are the most important resources for seeking that point. Yeah.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Again, please accept our congratulations to the Hart Foundation, to IAE, and to the Saudi Digital Library, 3 incredibly valuable and honorable recipients of this year's Knowledge Award. Thank you all for what you do to help create and support a knowledge economy. The fact that this is so important to you that you would spend your day in the company of others to learn and think through these issues is an incredibly powerful statement, particularly to the policymakers, the donors, and the funders who enable much of the work that's happening at our institutions and at your institutions as well. With that, thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.